vast majority of people I speak to in the resistance or freedom community, whatever you like to call it, are highly sensitive. A lot of them have a lot of trauma, a lot, both.
So I started off being fairly compliant because I'd kind of been forced to comply for my professional career, following the guidelines, which, to be fair, for most of my career were based on, a lot of them were wrong, of course, but they were based on the best available evidence at the time. So have I? But now I question absolutely everything. So can you change to go into this?
Yes.
From the 87.5% into the 12.5%? Can you learn to be one of the 12.5%? Is that what I've done?
Absolutely. And it has to be safe. You have to understand a bit of psychology, and it has to be safe for you to be able to. And I'm really glad you brought that point up, John, because I also did a complete 180. I actually, right at the start, in those highly dramatic first few weeks of lockdown, I asked my doctor about getting my daughter on the vaccine trial. This was sort of 18 months before it even came out, or a year before it came out, because she had a highly compromised immune system. And at the time, they said COVID was only a risk to the elderly and to those with compromised immune systems. I think that there's a lot of people, again, in the resistance community who get very angry with people who do 180s and who change. I think the most powerful thing is that change is by turning around from, being in one position, going along, being compliant. Again, why would we question? The government's telling us to do this. It's unsafe. The COVID's unsafe. Why would we question it? We live in England. We live in Australia. There's no propaganda. They will tell us the truth. So it takes quite a time and quite a lot of, I haven't heard your story, John, but stress and distress to make that change.
It does. It actually took quite a few months of this evidence to accumulate, and then the evidence was accumulating and accumulating. I say no. All the official teaching can't be wrong. The government does have our best interests at heart. Then it was almost overnight. The dam just burst.
It does.
And I thought, just a minute, this emperor is absolutely stark naked here.
Yeah.
And it's quite a distressing situation. But I mean, I'm glad to be in the 12.5%. Is it the red pill? I get them mixed up.
Yes, the red pill.
Yeah. Get my pills moved. Is the 12.5%? The amount of people now that are realising what's going on is increasing. So is this 12.5% now getting nearer 20%, do you think?
Look, that 12.5%, like I said, came from a particular field.
It's just the genetic predisposition.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've heard so many different figures with this. I don't know, John. But if I can, I'd really like to come back to the point you made about how distressing it was. When they find out, the ground's going to fall out from under them, as it did for so many of us. And we have to do it really, really gently and put away all of this division, which has been deliberately done.
There's a bit of a shame and embarrassment, really. I mean, I believe the propaganda on vaccines.
Huge.
And when I realised it was propaganda, I thought, just a minute. I wrote a textbook on physiology, and one of the chapters on that was in natural immunity. Where did that go?
Yeah.
I wrote a chapter on it. I taught it for 30 years, and yet you don't seem to have that rationality. And then when you realise it was propaganda, and you think, how could I not use that information that I'd spent my life accumulating? And you can tell that even now I'm still confused.
Yeah,
it's not a nice place to be.
It's not a nice place to be, and we still certainly don't have all the answers. I mean, like you, John, I pretty much fell to my knees when I realised. I was like, oh my God, they're using psychology. They're using all of this propaganda. It's been incredible what they've done. The shame piece is one of the biggest psychological blocks that we're dealing with, especially in the medical profession. It's the piece that has to be handled, again, most sensitively, and it's the reason I think raising awareness about the psychological piece is so huge. So they have the Hippocratic Oath, I will look after and do the best for my patients. And then they have a government saying, in some countries you are gagged, but in other countries it's pretty much implied. So they're ultimately completely stuck. Now, Bateson's way out of the double bind is he says the only thing that you can do is shine the light on the double bind. It needs to be named, because when it's named, then you can start looking at solutions. And again, coming back to the doctors, I think they're in an extraordinarily difficult situation. Yes, there might be some who are starting to become aware of what's going on and who are too scared to know. There are certainly others that still simply don't know. To have to do this complete 180 that we're actually right. And especially with doctors whose whole self-concept was built on, from childhood, being the smartest kid in the class. The potential for shame there is so huge. So we need to let them know you were manipulated. You were psychologically manipulated. You did the best that you believed. You did what you thought was right.
We have the ongoing psychological manipulation, and I think it is fair to call it psychological manipulation from mainstream media.
Yes.
Where there is one narrative, anything else is attacked, anything else is not trusted, anything else is disinformation. Fact checkers tell you what the facts are, but the fact is they're making them up as they go along. And there's the medical version of that, of course. Sorry, the medical version of that is medical journals now. Often publish what is bought and paid for.
It has to be done in a way to take away the shame. It's not because people are stupid. It's because people have directly targeted their unconscious brain, which will always win the race, drive the behaviour.
Why is it? Maybe we've spent the last while discussing this, but why is it so hard to admit that you're wrong? And is that harder? Yeah, I mean, is that part of the problem?
Yes. So I think, and I'll talk from a British and a masculine point of view here, because I grew up in a very British, very masculine family. I believe one of the biggest problems we've got is that men particularly are raised, and especially sort of private school boys, they're raised to discount their emotional life. When they're little, if they cry, stop being so sensitive, I'll give you something to cry about, all that kind of piece. And again, I don't think this came from a place of any sort of malevolence. I believe it came from the place of, ultimately, the men are the physical protectors, the men are the warriors. And so historically, we needed the men to be tough. And so we sort of pushed down the emotions. So we have all these men walking the planet, running most of the big organizations, the media, the pharma, all the C-levels, yeah, who don't have, most of them, there'll always be exceptions, but don't have that emotional realm. Their whole, again, self-concept, their ego, and I'm not using that in a pejorative sense, is formed around their intelligence. I rose to this level because I'm highly intelligent. So this is all, if this is all put across as, which it has been, the intelligent versus the idiots, the science, trust the science versus the idiots who don't get science, then, I mean, they've done it beautifully, John. You've got to give it to them. You've got to give it to how they've manipulated this. So we can't, and this is the piece. Presently, we've still got everyone trying to scream data. Look at all these vaccine injuries. Look at this, trying to shock them awake. It's not going to, I don't believe it's the way. They have to understand and that they've been manipulated.